Video that gives you hope, right? Yeah, it definitely does. Thank you so much, Sazini, for helping us focus on what is possible, because we framed it earlier, gave you an overview, but then after what Sazini has said is that there is an avenue, there is a way to help. But our next conversation actually takes us into more detail on the work of this program that you just saw in the video. This is also a session that is open for questions, so please prepare your questions. We have a Q&A as part of this session, so be ready for those. So for our segment, I'd like to call up to the stage our panelists, and let me tell you a little bit about them. First up is Professor Jackie Stewart. Now, she's the director of Student Health and Wellness Centers organizations based at UCT, also known as SureCore. Now, she's an associate professor at UCT, and Jackie Stewart was instrumental in the design of the Change the World program that is being supported by Vodacom. So you'll hear more on what exactly that curriculum entails. And then she's also joined by Tabile Mazibuko. You saw Tabile in the video a little bit earlier, and she's a psychosocial support coordinator in the Vodacom Foundation's Change the World program. And she's doing her work in the Free State, and she has many years of experience working in both the private sector and the public sector. She's absolutely passionate about young people, about the arts, and of course, providing adequate support to the youth that she works with. And then we're joined by Takalani Netichenze. She is joining our panel virtually, and she's the Director of External Affairs for Vodacom South Africa and the chairperson of the Vodacom Foundation. So if you could please give them a round of applause as they join us on the stage. Oh, Takalani, you're here. Wonderful that you could be here in person. Ladies, please, if you could find your seats. Just remember that we have ushers in the room. I'll kick things off, but ultimately we are going to open the session up to the floor, and we've got our eye on what's happening on the virtual platform, and of course we'll be taking questions from within the room. There we go. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's just frame some of these issues for our audience, right? And Takalani, I want to start with you. Now, Vodacom, through, with its partnership with the Department of Education, has placed these psychosocial professionals, as we heard Sito talking about earlier. Can you give us more scope, just a better understanding of this program? What does it entail, and what motivated Vodacom to provide support around GBV in this particular fashion?
Good morning. Thanks, Zenia.
Yes, good morning.
I'm very happy to be here.
Yes.
And thanks for all the recognition. It has already been said that South Africa has some of the highest levels of gender-based violence in the world. And there are intentions to bring the numbers down, but government alone cannot do this, and that is why partnerships are required. Vodacom is a partner to government, as you've heard, but we are not just the partner to the Department of Basic Education. We partner with social development, with the NPA, with the presidency, and with civil society. Our work as the Vodacom Foundation in the socio-economic development space started in 1999. But back then, we were running too many disparate projects in safety and security, health, education, and many others. But when the United Nations adopted the Sustainable Development Goals in 2016, 2017, Vodacom, the company, adopted some of the Sustainable Development Goals as part of its reporting framework. And with the assistance of Nick and Trialogue, the Vodacom Foundation reviewed its strategy, and we adopted 3 Sustainable Development Goals, which is partnerships, because partnerships are very important, health, education, and gender equality. And what we started doing was to not focus on verticals in these activities, but to have a much more comprehensive and integrated approach. And we started creating ecosystems. So we have an education ecosystem whose focus is not just on the learner, but it is also on the well-being of the learners, It is also on digital content and ensuring that more partners come into the space. And then on gender-based violence, our focus is on prevention, response, and victim and survivor support. And then as we're busy embedding the ecosystem, then COVID came. And we started seeing horrific reports about the high levels of gender-based violence in schools, bullying, teenage pregnancy, and the high dropout rates, especially amongst the girls. And at the same time, President Ramaphosa declared gender-based violence the second pandemic, and the UN chief, the Secretary General, declared gender-based violence the shadow pandemic. And I think in the second year of COVID, UNESCO issued a report, which was a study that was conducted in sub-Saharan Africa, indicating that during COVID, most of the girl learners are dropping out of school because there are no longer feeding schemes in the schools. They are being exploited by men, falling pregnant, and the majority of them would not go back to class because they would then have to start looking after the children. So we approached the Department of Basic Education to say, how can we help with our resources? Because the situation is basically untenable in South Africa. And this coincided with the president having written to Minister Angie Motshekga, asking her to pay attention to this scourge of gender-based violence in schools. So the timing was very good. But because as Vodacom, we're not experts in psychosocial support, we are not experts in gender-based violence, we depend on partners. So we approached Professor J.K. Stewart here to say, how can you assist us? We put resources on the table, bring your intellectual capability, and then we conceptualized this psychosocial support program together. And then she will talk about the work that they have done. So far, we have 23 psychosocial support experts in the schools. We're going to be adding 3 this year. And what is interesting is that we have deployed 2 in each school in 7 provinces. But the focus is not just on those host schools. The psychosocial support experts that we have deployed in each school, they're actually focusing on a cluster of schools in that district. So far, the program has covered over 400 families, 26,000 learners, and 42 schools.
Wow.
It's a phenomenal program.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, wow. I think that deserves a round of applause. Earlier, I was saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. This is exactly, but if you want to go far, go together. And this is exactly the partnership aspect that you're talking about. Jackie, let's hear more, because you were instrumental and involved in creating this curriculum, the coursework. Yep. Tell us more about the program.
Okay, so thanks, Anzania and Taki and Tabile for this exciting panel. I think the most important thing to realize is that it's evidence-based. I was at the time working at Stellenbosch University with the Institute of Life Course Health Research. And we were working with WHO to try and find, to really look and do a systematic review to find what were the components of a most successful program that could work with adolescents around violence. And I think evidence is important because I just want to tell you a little story of this village where there's like torrential rain and this river just starts to overflow and it's becoming really unsafe and trees are falling in and branches and this little frog is in the river and he manages to jump up onto a branch to save himself from getting hit by all the stuff in the river. And then he looks down and he sees his little friend, the fish, and he thinks, oh no, the fish is going to die. And so he reaches down and lifts the fish out of the river. So the moral of that story is that the fish obviously dies. And I think good intentions are not enough. We need to know that what we're doing helps, because sometimes what we think we're doing that we think is helping is sometimes doing harm. So it is really important that that we are driven from an evidence-based level, because you ask anyone in the NPO space, is what you're doing helping? Is it making a difference? And they will say yes, of course, because otherwise they wouldn't be remaining in that work. But the reality is that we don't know. If you ask them, okay, what evidence do you have that it works? They will anecdotally tell you, well, they had this one client, or I worked at this one school. That's not evidence. So research was very much behind this program. The other big component that I think was really important is that it's about systems strengthening. So it's about focusing on what is strong, not what is wrong. So there's a lot of great stuff happening in the education space, happening in the gender-based violence space. So how can we make more of the good stuff? How do we strengthen what's already happening? And we know at the school system, teachers are an incredible resource. But at the same time, we know our teachers are burnt out, they're traumatized themselves. So part of this program was seeing schools as a system, not just with learners, but how do we engage with teachers, not to give them additional content, but to say to them, how are you coping? How can we help you take care of yourself? And in that way, they will role model some of the program's main aims. So really what the program's trying to do is to create an enabling and empowering space for learners to find tangible ways and tangible pathways out of poverty and violence. And we focus on a number of topics. I've been really honored to have trained all the psychosocial support workers who are just incredible and were screened really well. So these are the people that have come to the course have been exceptional professionals. So some of the topics that we focus on are establishing a vision for the future that we know many of our adolescents do not have, that they've given up. The importance of understanding who you are, understanding your feelings, understanding the link between the mind and the body, and healthy coping mechanisms. And obviously conflict resolution, problem solving, and then focusing on, in general, at interpersonal violence. And then once you've got those bricks, then you can move to the final level where you're talking about gender-based violence. So it's really important to have all these components together. I was talking to someone the other day about the program, and he said, "Oh, no, we don't want the mental health part. Just leave that part out. Let's just talk about gender-based violence." I was like, oh.
So what does that do, though? What does that do, having those building blocks? As you said, it's evidence-based. So what does that do?
So the key thing with each of them is you're trying to help young people have a awareness of initially starting with what are the feelings I'm having. Because what we're wanting, we know young people are impulsive. And we know that, and that's biologically proven because their brains are still developing.
Their prefrontal cortex
hasn't fully developed. So we know they're impulsive. So what we're wanting to do is them to reach a level when they're in a high-risk situation, when tempers are rising, for them to have enough awareness to know, I'm getting really angry. And in the workshops, we talk with learners about how do you know you're angry? Like, where does it show on your body? Well, I get hot, I start sweating, or I feel like I'm going to cry, or my heart beats really fast. Yeah. Because if you have some of those sort of red flags, then you can know, okay, hold on, this is a high-risk situation for me. I need to disengage. And we use different tools around how you disengage. So, yeah, I mean, our program outcomes are obviously to decrease rates of gender-based violence and bullying, and then also to strengthen referral pathways within the school system. Because the Department of Basic Education does have referral pathways, but they're not often used to the extent that they should be. So it's really about how do we engage with other MPOs so that we can refer some of the more difficult cases onto further specialists.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll return to some of those details, but Tabile, let me bring you in because you've been directly involved in that CTW program at the school level. Yes. I'm really curious to hear from you about how it's being received by learners and teachers.
Okay.
And tell us more about your role and what you actually do.
Okay, thank you so much, Azane. The actual goal is to create a conducive environment for learning, which means each and every learner is cared and supported holistically. And how the program is delivered is that it's delivered through class-to-class sessions. We have presentations, we have group works, we also have awareness campaigns. And in terms of intervention within the school, we've created a strong relationship with the school-based support team. The school-based support team is responsible for determining the support need for learners, and also coordinating that support need. So as Vodacom Foundation, as we are based in these schools, we also form part of the stakeholders that are providing these services to the learners through the SBST. So what we do is that we provide counseling. We also assist them with case conferences. We also help them with recommendations. And sometimes we also make sure that we refer stakeholders if ever the intervention is in a form of the program. And as you know, that COVID-19 pandemic has left us with a lot of negative social impact, whereby a lot of people lost their jobs, and mental disorders, increase in violence. What we've done as Vodacom Foundation CTW, we've created this environment whereby it's easy for learners to come and report whatsoever is taking place in the home, or it can be in the school. And how teachers are receiving it is that they're also happy with the program, because the learning and the teaching is in progress. And while the teacher is teaching and referring the learners who need psychosocial support to the Vodacom Foundation CTW, which are placed in the school. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you received the training from Jackie.
Yes.
And you work alongside other colleagues.
Yes.
And so daily with these young learners, you run this program.
Yes.
And what has been their reaction to being presented with these questions about how are you feeling, and some of the other things that give them a sense of self-awareness?
To tell you the truth about psychosocial programs when they are presented in our communities, we are not familiar with them as Black people. So sometimes we need to create a conducive environment with these learners, teachers, also the community at large. So we are assisted by the stakeholders to make sure that we present ourselves well in these communities. So after we've created this conducive environment, it was easy for them to take the step with us, and also to understand themselves. Yeah. And also, we need to reveal that as Black people, the environment that we're growing in does not allow us to have self-identity. You don't know how to identify yourself. So we're also assisting them with the self-identification, so, which is easy for them to move with us on some of the programs.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a lot of self-development work. But Jakalani, let me come back to you. What's been the impact? I think we heard a little bit of it earlier with Sito just giving an overview. But what's been the impact of this initiative since you launched it 3 years ago?
So following our adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, and again with the assistance of Nick, we set up a monitoring and evaluation function in-house in Vodacom. And subject to correction, I believe that Vodacom is the only JSE-listed company that has got an in-house monitoring and evaluation function. We established, this is the domain of civil society organizations and government. We established the function in-house so that we should begin to monitor the impact of our investments in everything that we do in the Vodacom Foundation, and also in stakeholder relations. So we then started evaluating and monitoring our education ecosystem, and also the gender-based violence ecosystem. And during COVID, we decided it is time now to check how the psychosocial support program is doing. And we then started with interviewing the learners, the teachers, and also the community-based partners, who are the police, community-based social workers, and anybody that was interested in the program. And the results are quite phenomenal. Firstly, there aren't enough social workers
Yes.
at community level, which is a tragedy, considering the amount of social ills that we have in this country. It's even tragic that there are no social workers at all in quintile 1, 2, 3 schools, which are the most which are the poorest schools.
Fee-free schools.
Exactly. So what we are finding from the program is that not only are we assisting the learners with self-esteem and self-confidence and for them to open up about their social challenges, but the program has also started creating jobs. Some of the social workers and psychologists that we have brought into the program, when we interviewed them together with Professor here, we found that they did not have jobs. They had qualified, but they were not employed. So it is good that the program is actually contributing to job creation.
I mean, this just demonstrates the power of business,
Exactly.
the level of good business is able to do.
Exactly. And when we started the program, the intention was just to contract these psychosocial support experts just for a period of 1 year. But we then reflected and said, looking at the high levels of unemployment in the country and sitting with professionals that are not getting jobs, let's consult with our employment relations specialists to see if we cannot extend the contract period. And of course, with advice, we have now extended it to a period of 2 to 3 years, which is great. And then from the impact at the school, we are finding that the program is assisting the teachers to focus on pedagogy. And the psychosocial support experts are focusing on the well-being of the learners. And in return, this is contributing to learner and good performance and good educational outcomes. Because what we realize is that most learners drop out of school not because they lack the intellectual ability to perform, but it is because they bring a lot of baggage from home. They bring a lot of baggage from the streets. And then when you have this kind of support in the schools, it helps a lot. And then there are some recommendations because there are weaknesses with every program that you run. And the purpose of this, as I said, is to identify those weaknesses and say, how do we assist to make sure that the program is effective? There are instances in some schools where some of the teachers are finding the psychosocial support experts to be competing. Yes, and we are saying the intention is not to bring competition, but to complement what you are doing, which means that we need to do a lot of awareness about the role of the program. We have presented the findings to the Department of Basic Education with the recommendations, and this was presented at DDG level. We were nervous that the program was not going to be embraced, even though we started it together. But when they looked at the findings and the impact of the program, they have decided that we need to present to the minister. So the next step is for us to have a round table with the Minister of Basic Education, the newly appointed Minister in the Presidency for Women, Children and People with Disabilities, and the Minister of Social Development, so that we talk about the impact of the program. And what we want to see as Vodacom is to go back to what used to happen back during the apartheid days, where there used to be a lot of social workers, at community level. So we want that to be reinforced.
I'm actually not surprised about what you mentioned about teachers feeling that there's some competition going on, because when you enter communities that already have their own systems, there can be some antagonism or some resistance to whatever initiative you're bringing. So what have you learned about this, or rather, is there a need for a change of approach, or what have you learned about entering into a little microcosm where already there are power structures, there are systems in place, and as an outsider coming in?
It is important to galvanize the support of all stakeholders when you introduce a new program, so that people feel that they own the program rather than them seeing themselves as outsiders. And also for them to understand the reason why you are there. So for instance, one of the findings is that there is a high prevalence of dropout rate in Limpopo. Now, you need to educate the public to understand what the high level of dropout rate means
Yes.
for the learners, because it means there is no future. The youth are supposed to be the future. But if they cannot make it because of social ills, then it means there is no future in this country. And therefore, when you educate the public about the need for them to own the program, it helps and it goes a long way. One of the things that came out of the program is that Gauteng and KZN are actually leaders in gender-based violence. And this is something that we also learned during COVID, during the lockdown periods. And the program is actually showing that there is a high prevalence of suicide and attempted suicide in these areas. So you need to educate the parents, you need to educate the communities to understand the impact of gender-based violence and all societal ills, and let them be at the forefront of leading this fight against gender-based violence.
Right. Jackie, some of the things that Takalani mentioned, I think I'm curious about if we could drill that down. I saw that the United Nations report reveals that things like truancy, a decrease in educational performance, depression, fatigue, and then later aggressive behavior, as well as other psychological effects, are just some of the results of violence associated with schools. And we are seeing a lot of disturbing cases of violence happening in our schools. But also ultimately that regular exposure to violence can reinforce the message that it is the preferred way of solving any kind of conflict, or the way of instilling discipline. And can also compromise the ability to form trusting relationships with others eventually. So how does your cause kind of deal with these fundamental issues?
Well, there's no doubt that early exposure to early childhood adverse events, violence and trauma manifest in the ways that you've both been talking about. But what is really important for us to remember in South Africa is that very often we can't compare ourselves with the global north, which a lot of that data comes from. And when I ran a research center in Kalicha for 12 years, and we were running a research project with Bath University, and they were interested in looking at the impact of trauma on children up to like the age of 16. And so we would go to the emergency service units, the emergency units at hospitals. We worked with Kalicha District Hospital, and that's where we would get caregivers or parents to give us consent to work with their children. And it was so interesting when having a conversation with Bath University when they were analyzing their data. So they were doing the same, going to emergency units and finding young people who had been injured enough in some kind of event to be hospitalized. So that was the main inclusion criteria. And Bath University, the kind of cases that they spoke about were single event, an acute single event that happened, like a motor vehicle accident. That was like 90% of the cases. And they were horrified by the cases that we were picking up in the hospitals, which was continuous, repeated traumas that a young person at the age of 16 had already experienced at least 4 major traumatic or violent incidents. And the kind of incidents that they were exposed to was horrific gender-based violence, being in a taxi accident where the taxi went to light and they witnessed people being burnt to death, gunshot wounds, stabbings. And I think that's something also for us to think about in terms of corporate responsibility or accountability to communities. And it's one of those difficult things, I suppose, between what the profit-making side of business versus social responsibility side. And we certainly saw through COVID, which we knew already, that you take alcohol out of the mix and our emergency rooms are empty. And I, when working with the Kalicha District Hospital, I used to work with the emergency service doctor a lot. And he said to me that they regard the Black Friday weekend, they call it the Bloodbath weekend, because they know that they will lose between 15 to 20 young men through gunshot wounds and stabbings over that weekend.
Sure.
So we need to just be mindful of what we're dealing with, which is a lot. And I think our young people have essentially given up. I think there are so many barriers. There's so much going on at a community level that a young person is in a survival mode. And research has shown time and time again that a young person who I'm just trying to remember my fact now here. A young person who has a vision for the future is much less likely to engage in risk-taking behavior than one that doesn't. And we have 95% of our youth having no vision for the future, imagining that they don't have a pathway out and they are going to be just like their parents and the generations before. So part of this program really is about imagining a different future. And looking at what would be, how do we overcome the very real barriers to success, and how do we find pathways out of poverty? So part of that is providing skills and tools, but part of it is also exposing them to psychosocial experts who look like the youth, who talk like the youth, who come from the same areas of the youth. And they are role models. They got out, they found a way out. There is a way out.
Right.
And so I think that's incredibly useful at the same time as teaching skills and tools. One of the other key premises of the course is it's called cognitive behavioral theory. And cognitive behavioral theory looks at the impact of what you think, your cognitions have an impact on your behavior, has an impact on your emotions. And one of the things that we try and help our learners focus on is there's certain things within your control and there's certain things that are outside of your control.
Yeah.
So you can't control the fact that you're going to the school that you're going to, that you're living in a violent community. You can't control that. But there are a number of things that you can control, and the program opens up conversations around those things that they do have control over. And more than anything, they have control over themselves and their behaviors. And really to sort of unpack for them risk factors versus protective factors. So that's something you really have, to some extent, control over. So risk factor, we know if you're at a shebeen at 3 a.m. in the morning, there's a very high likelihood that you're going to be involved in some violent incident, whether you're the victim or the perpetrator. So how does one use protective factors to help young people make decisions that will have a large impact on themselves? And we say to them, if you get involved in a violent incident, yes, that's terrible for the other person, but we're talking about you. We're wanting to look out for you. So if you get involved in that incident and you happen to be carrying a knife on you, you've been drinking, you stab somebody, the implications for that future that will be there are then gone.
Yeah.
So how do you make decisions that will prevent exposure as much as possible to violence?
Oh, the scenarios or the pictures that you paint really makes one want to weep, but there's obviously a way out. As you said, this is an instrumental part of the program to demonstrate that this is not par for course. It's not a defined destiny. It can be changed. I also wanted to know about gender. Sazini earlier was talking about men, and I know this conversation is about addressing gender-based violence early, but when we think about some of the stats, if we were to just look at them, and the numbers of murders, for instance, in the country, you say 1 year it was about 20,000 or so, and 4,000 of those were the murders of women, which means, and children, and that would mean that 16,000 of those are of men perpetrating that violence towards other men. And also in this conversation around shifting perspectives, shifting attitudes, the work has to be addressed to those that perpetrate the violence in society.
Yep.
So is there a different approach in the program towards how boys internalize these issues and how girls internalize these issues and perhaps the different needs?
So I was actually going to talk to that in the next point, but I can talk to it now.
Oh, okay.
That's also fine. Yeah, I could not agree more with our previous speaker, who was saying that we cannot exclude boys and men from these conversations and these programs. So it has to be both and, not either or.
Yeah.
And the reality is toxic masculinity, nobody wins from. Men lose out and women lose out. Like, it comes from both sides. I was in a meeting a few weeks ago with the Ike Tigers. I work at UCT. And so we have been approached by the Ike Tigers about partnering with Shawco, which is an NPO linked to UCT. And we were sitting around this table with these massive guys, you know, these real, like, this idea of this tough masculine guy. And they were asking about our programs, and our students were talking about toxic masculinity and whatever. Yeah. And the meeting actually got derailed in a good way, because these rugby players were saying to us, but what is that? Can you, like, we're always hearing of that term. So, but how do we as men, like, I don't know, what do we need to be doing? And the one guy gave an example of, if I'm out in a pub and my girlfriend, by mistake, spills a drink over another guy, as she's walking away from the bar, and this guy then becomes aggressive to her, calls her all sorts of things, and starts becoming aggro. This guy was saying, and he was massive, so I mean, anyone would not argue with this guy. He was saying, my gut response would be to come forward and to be aggressive and to use my power and say, do not talk to my girlfriend like that. If you will continue, we can take this outside. So he said, that's how I think, and that's how I think my girlfriend would want me to respond, to protect her. But I realize, is that toxic masculinity? And if it is, then how should I be responding? Do I just go, okay, that's all right, my girlfriend's got this, I'll just stand back and leave it. So these are conversations that we need to be having, because men often don't know either. They're equally as confused about what it means and in what ways can you stand up and make a difference. And it also, I mean, I know we're mostly talking about working in resource-constrained, disadvantaged communities. But somebody once said to me recently in a meeting, of which I had to really practice my own anger regulation, is somebody said to me, can we run programs for guys at UCT, but of course, you know, we can leave the guys from Rondebosch and Bishops, you know, the more affluent schools, because because that obviously this stuff isn't really relevant to them. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, so I started like giving all the stats of like, what are you talking about? They, as much as anybody else, need to be attending these workshops.
This does not exclude class, color.
Exactly.
Universal.
But his perception was that if you live in a southern suburbs, wealthy area, go to that school, then actually there is no gender-based violence in those areas. And when I started giving him stats, talk about mansplaining, guys. I mean, really, this guy then was like saying to me, no, don't come with me with all your stats. And I very rarely use my title. I tend to not use it, but I really was tempted to say, I'm a professor in psychology. You are telling me that these stats are meaningless. I mean, like, you know, so I think we've got a lot of work to do, and we need to be working in those spaces.
Absolutely. Now, Tabile, the idea with this program is to create spaces of safety in schools, and for these spaces for schools to be spaces where learners can feel safe, feel that they can flourish. I'm really curious about the changes that you've observed. You know, have you managed to do that, number one, and have you seen that change?
There are a lot of successful stories to talk about.
Wow.
First of all, as Vodacom Foundation, we conduct anti-bullying campaigns quarterly. And this is a collaborative program between Vodacom Foundation, CTW, SAPS, Social Crime Unit, and also Community Policing Forum. And the reason of this collaboration is to make learners understand that when you talk about bullying, it's not only about the person who's being bullied, but it also affects the society. So, and the other successful story that I can talk about is that we have converted bullies into mentors. Because of the constant reporting of bullying, we've decided to select bullying ambassadors. And the initiative was the initiative was after the counseling session that we have with the bullying ambassadors. The major concern was that they felt not loved or cared by anyone. So what we did, the purpose of the initiative was to create a platform whereby they feel responsible, and also whereby we regard them as important, and also to redirect their aggression or the need to hurt others into something positive. And also, during the intervention, we also invited the families. The reason why we invited them is because we can sense that there is an element of something that is happening at home. So we also invited them. The main aim of doing counseling with the families was that we wanted to address and correct some of the dysfunctionality on the household level, and also to create support for these learners. So after our interventions, we are receiving positive comments from the teachers, learners, parents, even the members of the community, because these learners who were bullying kids in the school, they're also doing it in the community.
Yeah.
So after that intervention, there were now mentors. They are no longer bullies. And the other thing that we did, before releasing them to the community, what we did is that we collaborated with the community stakeholders to make sure that the community is safe. We conduct bullying awareness, we conduct awareness campaigns, we do community dialogues, and we also form part of the war rooms in the community to make sure that these social ills that are reflected by the learners in the school are tackled within the community level.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, because they also can be the symptom of that overall community. As we
Yes.
always say, you know, these problems aren't coming out of the blue.
Yes.
They emerge out of community environments.
Yes.
So there was an unmet need, in a way, that these learners had an unmet need of not being seen, or that they want a role, they want responsibility. And you were able to give them that, which
Yes.
then diverted the way they respond.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
Is that I think when we think around bullies, they're very often like the leader of a peer group.
Yeah.
So that, as much as it seems counterintuitive, these are people who are showing leadership. They're able to have people to gather, galvanize people behind them. So to find a way like this to kind of try and turn that around,
Yeah.
and acknowledge actually what skill they do have, and help them to channel it in a different direction, I think is really important.
Yeah, and it must be quite transformational to see someone move from being the source of stress and violence to seeing them being a source of responsibility and support to others.
Yes.
Tell us about some of the kids that you've been working with.
Some of the kids are just, as I've said, that we have a new society that was created by the pandemic. Some of them are just wanting attention. That's all. The reason why you are there, yes, it's on the work level. However, we find ourselves being parents. We have to adopt children's learners. We also have to do adopt a child programs, and also to make sure that we provide them with the space whereby they're giving basic needs, because some of them, they're coming from poor families. So they are getting the parenthood from us. We're not only professionals, they were also parents. Some of them can just come in the morning and say, "Hi, mommy, just wanted to say hi." Then they
Oh.
go, and during the break they come, hello, mama. Then also when they go home, they also come and say, I'm going home, and they also just bulge in just to say, I've managed to get this mark. So how can I do? How can I do better? Can you assist me? So as I've said, that we're not only professionals there, we're also playing the role of being parents.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God, that deserves a round of applause. It helps to give so much hope, Tabile. I hope you're ready with your questions on the floor, because we do have some coming in even virtually. The rest of the segment is devoted to your input. What has stirred? What questions arise? What are you curious about as far as the program is concerned? If we can have hands, and we have ushers, of course, who will bring a mic to you. We have several hands here in the front. And what about our delegates at the back? This is also an opportunity for you to participate. There's a question right there. You're passing. There we go.
Hello.
Hello. Is it on?
I don't think it's on.
Yes,
Oh, there
it
it
is.
There.
It
Oh,
is.
goodness. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. My name is Tina Mason. I come from an organization called the Green Light Movement. And we have a measurement and methodology and a metrics that measures the impact of interventions on the poverty spectrum. So it was so heartening to hear you talking about using evidence in a real data-specific sense that comes from not anecdotal. Because that's so much of our experience, is that we have assumptions about what needs to be fixed. And in fact, when you do real data measurement, you discover you're way off track. So that was really heartening to hear, and that a corporate organization in South Africa is investing in this level of work, which in fact most corporates invest in business. And there's this assumption that not-for-profit foundation or social purpose work somehow has a softer agenda, when in fact the same kind of rigor is required, in fact more so. So that's extremely exciting. And my third point is quickly, obviously there is a positive spill-off into the family. Have you been able to measure what the impact of the transformation of a child, creating a sense of vision, has on the family, or his little broader family, or her broader family?
That's a really great question. And if not, will the program start to look into that as it develops? Who wants to take that
Can I
question?
respond to the evidence-based
Yes.
part first? I totally agree with you, and I think when we talk about holding ourselves accountable, I think NPOs need to be holding themselves accountable, because not only to the communities, but to the funders who are giving the money. And I think one of the really important things is for us all to stop working in silos. Academia needs to be working with corporates. We need to be working with the Department of Education, and we need to be working interprofessionally. Part of my job is also working in the Division of Global Surgery at UCT. And one of the things that, my team has anaesthetists, we have medical doctors, we have obs and gynae, we have like so many different kinds of people, because we're all, one of the aims of global surgery is to decrease the need for surgery. So the way to do that, one of the ways to do that is prevention, because you want to prevent gunshot wounds and stabbings, because they will end up on the operating theatre. So sometimes we make assumptions of, oh no, but that's a university thing. I think gold standard MPOs need to be driven by evidence, and I think then we see a ripple effect. Just in terms of your other question, which I'm sure Tabile maybe wants to answer to as well. But if we're working in a systems approach, and we're saying that a school is a system and it's part of a larger system, that you then see ripples in a pond, because the learners go home and talk about these things with their families. These are really important things. When we were running this program initially in the Eastern Cape, we had the learners present the program to their caregivers, or anyone they could choose as a mentor. And we had so many caregivers of, 40, 50 coming up to us, years old, coming up to us saying, we've never been taught this stuff. This stuff sounds incredible. When my son came home and started telling me about these kind of things, I thought, why don't we? So there's no reason that then we can't run workshops for caregivers and whatever over the weekends or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
Tell me,
yeah.
what have you seen? Any feedback from parents and guardians?
In terms of the feedback from the parents is that the Vodacom Foundation, CTW, we are not only providing the services that are on the package, however, we're also helping the families in redirecting their social goals.
Right.
And also introducing young people in the family context to contribute in some of the developments that are taking place in the family. And also, we've also assisted parents in making sure that we give them resources that are in line with the contemporary society, because there's a lot of change that is brought by fourth industrial revolution. For instance, some of the interaction that we've done was through the intervention of cybersecurity, because some of the intervention is not easy to do it with the parents because some of them are clueless. These learners are raised by our parents. Some of us are working and we are left them with the parents. So we also need to create that conducive environment whereby we familiarize them with the technology. So I think as Vodacom Foundation, you're not only providing the package that was done by Ujeki, but we're also making sure that we are moving the programs that we've been programmed, that the society, this is how the society works, but we are doing it based on the contemporary society.
You're right. I think that's probably part of the success.
Just to add
Yes.
on that, when we adopted the gender-based violence ecosystem as Vodacom, it was deliberate to demonstrate the interrelatedness of prevention, response, and victim support, with more focus on prevention. And we believe very strongly that prevention has to start at home in the family. In fact, we as parents actually contribute unwittingly to gender-based violence by the manner in which we socialize the boy and the girl at home. We socialize the boy to be strong, to be a fighter, and to be aggressive and never to show emotion. If the boy cries, it means the boy is weak. And the girl is socialized differently. So this inequality manifests in gender-based violence, and they take this socialization wherever they go, to the school. And if caregivers in the schools are also not educated to break away these stereotypes, it means they graduate from school and they go to university and they go to work and they show this aggression in the workplace.
Yeah.
So let's accept responsibility as parents. I remember in one of the thought leadership sessions where we had specialists talking to us about gender-based violence. This one parent said, she said to the brother, "Why are you not washing the dishes and cleaning after yourself after eating?" And he was busy on his PlayStation. And he said, "No, I am busy. My sister will clear the dishes." And she said, "What is it that makes you think that it is your sister that can wash the dishes?
And not you."
Does your sister use her vagina to wash the dishes?"
I'm never going to forget that one.
We were like, "God, I never thought about it that way." She says that killed it. He stood up and he went to wash the dishes.
And forevermore, it was gone.
Can I also add on that? I mean, I was also just thinking about these kind of things that we do unconsciously very often. Sometimes it's not obvious to us, so it's hard for us to change behavior if we're not even aware that that we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I think many people aren't. I often, when running workshops, tell this sort of riddle to people. And can I quickly tell it? It's not too long.
Okay.
Of a man, a father and a son are traveling up to the Eastern Cape, and they have a fatal car accident. And in the accident, the father is fatally killed. He dies in the accident. And the boy is rushed to hospital via helicopter, immediately rushed into surgery. And as the surgeon walks up and sees the young boy, the surgeon says, "Oh my God, I can't operate this boy's my son. Who's the surgeon? And you have so many people saying, was he adopted? Was it in vitro fertilization? Was it actually the mother? It was the mother.
It was the mother.
But people you don't make, and I've asked this in rooms of surgeons with women who have not found that answer. So unconscious biases are really important that we engage with.
Yeah, and address them. Let's come back to the floor, and we've got a few more questions on the virtual. Where's our mic? Here. Hello.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My name is Ngosinathi Mushwana, COO Operations at Prime Stars. Firstly, Taki, can we take that story you just gave and put it in an educational movie? I think it will reach a lot more communities and make a lot of impact, because we teach using movies. I'm standing up because this concept and this topic is very close to me. I was raised by a village of women, and I've been in the education space for over 10 years. Don't ask me about my age. This is my impact partner, Sweetie Sweet, and we've been in academics, but about 2 years ago, I went on probably one of the most challenging but impactful journeys of my life in GBV prevention, focusing on young boys. We've done so nationally in township, rural, and urban communities, and teaching using movie. And we've found incredible insights in these conversations, and what I love about the conversation is that there's many pillars that align. One, the social compact movement, so from government to business, civil society, GBV stakeholders. Some of our partners are here, the likes of Cecil, Siriti, Markham, and the likes. And interestingly, we don't have a telco in this program. I'm just putting it out there.
Telco. Did you say
a telco?
A telco.
Telecoms communications company. Vodacom, someone said. Why we're standing up is that last year we began this process and we reached over 15,000 young men in 100 communities, teaching through film, engaging through content, but one of the key elements was through mentorship. And the message of mentorship was to say that men need to stop abdicating the responsibility of being role models to young men. We deliberately, and we got some flack for it, but we stuck to it, only accepted men as mentors. We got 1,000 registrations for mentors. Half of those were women, which was powerful for us, but we had to get men to understand the importance of being present, because 6 out of 10 homes don't have fathers. And in that process, we got incredible insights, as you said, Jackie, in the outcomes and impact of that process around relatability, absent fathers, the fact that hurt people hurt people, and having the majority of our boys who are seen as perpetrators actually being victims. And what worries us is that the boys we are talking to nationally have this notion that there is a negative narrative being painted for them. About them. And how do they get out of that? We've been with government. You spoke of social development, basic education, presidency. We're working with them as well. So why I stood up is for 3 reasons. And I'll give a bonus. One bonus is, ladies and gentlemen, next week, Tuesday, is International Day of the Boy Child.
Right.
I don't know if people know that. Right, so we're driving a national movement for boy children in preventing GBV by raising a nation of good men, by redefining masculinity.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to
I'd like
ask that you give us your 3 points fairly quickly.
So please make sure you do something on International Day of the Boy Child. 3 things, an offer. We've got insights, we've got data, we've got research, we've got content. We'd like to offer it to the Vodacom Foundation and other partners in order to learn more about what's going on. And thanks to Trialogue, page 174 has information on the program. So our offer is to give insight, right? Please. 2 is an invite. We'd like to invite you to join us in this movement and all civil society partners to join this program. What About the Boys? Nationally, we launched with presidency on the 6th of June, right? 3, it's a challenge. Men in society, men in the audience, you are unconscious and conscious role models, right? The conscious is your living activity. The unconscious is what you do not know. The boys follow what you think they don't know you do. We challenge you to join us as role models in raising a nation of good men.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me come to our online audience as well. Tori has an interesting question, and Tori says, I'd really be interested to see what evidence is considered solid enough when reflecting on feelings and behavior of youth And she also asks, is the training that is given to the psychosocial support workers available to other organizations? And Tori Gardner is from Cool Play. They offer psychosocial support to learners through sport and play in the Western Cape. So brief answer on those two issues.
Yeah, it's definitely available. I mean, it was originally the WHO Stellenbosch partnership started a program called Zafune. And it was Zafune that was had a large randomized control trial. And it was actually when we were giving feedback to WHO and UNICEF about our results that a Department of Basic Education, one of the deputy directors, happened to be there and approached me afterwards. And I said, here's all our stuff, you know,
Okay.
and it was through that then that Vodacom heard about it. What was her other question?
Can this program be available? Or what evidence is considered evidence enough or hard enough when it comes to the emotions of young people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and one of the things is that's tricky is the no-do paradox, because we may know certain things, so knowledge doesn't equal change. So just because I know that eating chocolate and sweet things is not good for me, I continue to do that because I really like them.
Yeah.
So we need to interrogate what, and actually in a research project that we ran on a soccer program with young men, the program asked a lot of stuff around, you know, change in terms of knowledge. And in the questionnaires where the men were filling in around respect for women, what you should and shouldn't be doing, it looked wonderful afterwards. I was like looking at this data and thinking, oh my gosh, this program's amazing. These guys like totally changed the way they think. 3 sections later, we asked about behavior. In the last 3 months, have you hit, slapped, or punched a woman? And a whole range of questions. And they're really ticking yes. So there was a big disconnect between the two. We really need to be asking behavioral change questions as well. And yeah, those require more work. But yeah, I think that would be important.
Wow. Taki, I'm going to let you have the last word. What is your vision? What's the Vodacom Foundation vision for this program? Like that big vision.
We are really committed to socioeconomic development. But as I said in the beginning, we believe in partnerships. We are fully aware that what we are doing is a drop in the ocean. And the main objective of running the monitoring and evaluation was to look at the impact, as I say, to identify weaknesses and how we address those weaknesses. We have identified the weaknesses, and one of the weaknesses is that we do not have enough psychosocial support experts on the field and in the schools. And therefore, we are making a call to government to prioritize this space, to deploy more of these professionals.
We need more
because
Tabiles
there are
in this
those
world.
that have graduated, they're sitting at home, they don't have jobs. Some don't even want a salary. They are just saying, please engage me because I want to give back and I want to get fulfillment.
Yeah. We need more Tabiles in our community.
And we want
And
more
in every
corporates to join us. We are in the ESG space. We are not in the space of competition. What we are
Right.
doing is not competition sensitive. So we are not afraid as Vodacom to say, partner with us, let's do this together.
Yes. Well, a round of applause, please, for our panel. Thank you so much, Taki. Thank you to Jackie and thank you to Tabile. Thank you so much
Thank
to
you.
the three of you. A lot of lessons learned, especially as far as how we will do future panels. I think we'll need more time to take questions from the floor. What do you think of that? To afford more time to your contributions. Lesson learned for the next panels that we will be running. We are going to break for tea, but before we break for tea, because we are wrapping up this particular segment, we're going to take a pause. This is the pause moment that we promised you. It's the time where you get to jump onto the virtual platform, or you can use the booklets that you have in front of you, courtesy of Volkswagen South Africa. It's that moment where you put down your insights, your ideas. And let's start our moment now before we break for tea. I'll give us about a minute or so where we all sit in silence and contemplation and jot down those big ideas that potentially could win you that great prize later. So please do go ahead.
Tell me please, is it a choice or only destiny? Destiny, it's clear to me. We are the rulers of reality, and I believe the only way to know where we're headed is to never second guess or regret it.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. I just want to remind you that the ideas that you share on the virtual platform are going to be looked at, and we'll be awarding a great prize a little bit later on. So you could win yourself an NPO listing on Trialogue's Knowledge Hub. So keep contributing them throughout the day. Don't forget the feedback forms, because that's also another way for you to access one of the great prizes offered as part of the 2-day conference. But for now, we're going to break for tea. Can we please be back in this room at 11:20? And make sure that you experience the exhibitions that are outside and be back in this room at 11:20. Thank you very much.